You know, I always thought I had it all figured out. I believed in loyalty, in commitment, those old-fashioned values they talk about. I thought, if you love someone enough, if you're there for them, then that's all you need to keep your marriage strong. And I was sure, so sure, that my wife Jess felt the same way. We'd been through a lot together, and I never doubted her, not once. Sure, I had those moments where I thought, what if? What if she cheated? What if everything came crashing down? But then I'd brush it off, tell myself, that wasn't us. That wasn't my Jess. We had something different, something solid. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. I used to see myself as the guy who'd get through life with one woman by my side, through thick and thin. I wanted that picture-perfect ending, you know, happiness until the very end. It wasn't just a dream. It was my plan, my goal. That's what I was working for every single day, providing, staying loyal, thinking if I played my part, then life would reward me with a faithful partner and a happy home. But as much as I held on to that dream, there was always this nagging fear in the back of my mind. This feeling, I guess, that no matter how much you give, there's always that risk, always that chance that it's not enough. And that fear, well, I buried it deep because it just couldn't happen to me, right? Not to us. I had doubts like anyone, but I brushed them aside. Jess wouldn't do that to me. She wouldn't. But then, that's the funny thing about doubt. It has a way of creeping in when you least expect it, making you question everything you thought you knew. After Steve left, I just stood there, frozen. It didn't make sense. I kept thinking, this can't be real. I mean, how could Steve know something so personal about my life, about my marriage, when I had no clue? I trusted Jess with everything, and now here I was, hearing from a neighbor that she'd been with someone else. It felt like someone had handed me a puzzle with missing pieces. I kept going over it in my mind. Maybe Steve was mistaken. Maybe he saw someone else. Maybe he misunderstood. I clung to any explanation that made this whole thing a big misunderstanding. How could someone from outside my life know more about what was going on inside my marriage than I did? That just didn't sit right with me. But no matter how much I wanted to deny it, I couldn't shake the feeling that Steve wouldn't have said anything if he wasn't sure. He's not the type to spread rumors or get involved in other people's business. If he told me, it was because he thought I had a right to know. Still, I didn't want to believe it. It was easier to pretend it wasn't true than to face the possibility that Jess was actually cheating on me. I started replaying moments in my head, times when Jess had been distant or when she'd been a little too secretive about her phone. But then I'd stop myself. No, you're just being paranoid, I'd tell myself. Jess wouldn't do that. I kept flipping between trusting her completely and doubting everything. It was exhausting, mentally tearing me apart. It's one thing to have your suspicions, but it's something else entirely when someone else confirms them. It made it real, and I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to face the possibility that my marriage, the life I'd built with Jess, was built on lies. But there was no going back now. The seed of doubt had been planted, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore it. After that conversation with Steve, I started to feel like I was unraveling. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was what it did to me, to my sense of self. I've always considered myself a decent guy, you know. Not perfect, but loyal. I worked hard to provide for Jess and for us. I thought that was enough, that if you gave your all, your partner would appreciate you and stay by your side. But now, with this hanging over me, I couldn't help but ask myself, why wasn't I enough? Why did Jess need someone else? Especially a guy like him. someone with money, status, all the things I don't have. That's when the comparisons started. And let me tell you, they didn't do me any favors. I started picking myself apart, piece by piece. I'd look in the mirror and see every flaw, every wrinkle, every gray hair that maybe hadn't been there a few years ago. And I'd think, is this what did it? Did I stop being attractive to her? It's a sick feeling, wondering if your whole relationship fell apart because you weren't good enough. I'd always thought Jess loved me for who I was, but now I wasn't sure anymore. And then there was the money. I couldn't help but think about the guy she'd left me for. The rich and famous guy. What did he have that I didn't? Oh, right. Money, success, status, things I hadn't been able to achieve yet. I'd always been working towards something better, but now it felt like I'd fallen short, like I hadn't climbed high enough, fast enough. It started messing with my head. My self-worth was tied up in being a good husband, a provider, and now I felt like I'd failed on both fronts. How was I supposed to compete with a guy who had everything? I felt small, invisible, like no matter what I did, it wouldn't measure up. I even started questioning everything outside of my marriage, my friendships, my work. Was I failing there too? Were people just pretending to like me, like Jess had been pretending? The doubt spread, eating away at every corner of my mind. And the worst part? I didn't have any answers, just a constant loop of, why wasn't I enough, playing over and over in my head. I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I had to know the truth, straight from her. The doubts, the questions, they were eating me alive. So one night, after dinner, I sat Jess down. I tried to keep calm, but my heart was pounding in my chest and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Jess, there's something we need to talk about, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me, a little confused at first, but then her expression shifted. It was subtle, just a flicker of something across her face. But I saw it. I knew. Before I even asked the question, I knew. I took a deep breath and just laid it out there. Steve told me he's seen you with someone else. Is it true? For a moment, time seemed to stand still. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted to the floor, then back up to meet mine. And in that split second of silence, everything changed. She didn't deny it. That was the first punch to the gut. No excuses. No, how could you believe that? Just silence. Then finally, she spoke, and her words hit me like a freight train. Yes, Mike, it's true. I can't even describe the wave of emotions that hit me. Anger, sadness, betrayal. It all rushed in at once. My mind was racing, trying to process what she'd just said. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. I needed to understand. I needed a reason, something to make sense of this mess. But the answer she gave me didn't help. I don't know, she said. Her voice small, almost as if she was ashamed. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to, but he made me feel something that I hadn't felt in a long time. That was it. Her words, simple as they were, cut me deeper than I ever thought possible. She didn't feel something for me anymore. I wasn't enough for her, and she found someone else who made her feel more alive, more wanted. The weight of that realization was crushing. I couldn't even speak after that. I just sat there, staring at her, as if looking for some sign that this was all a nightmare and I'd wake up any second. But I didn't, and neither did she. The truth was out, and there was no going back. After that conversation, everything felt like it came crashing down. It's hard to explain how empty I felt, like the world had just collapsed in on itself, and I was standing in the ruins of what used to be my life. The house was the same. Everything around me was the same, but inside, I was shattered. I remember walking around in a daze for days afterward. I'd go to work, come home, but nothing made sense anymore. It felt like I was on autopilot. I didn't know how to function in a world where Jess had betrayed me, where the life we'd built together was based on a lie. I kept thinking, how could this happen? How could she do this to me? And the worst part was, I didn't have an answer. No matter how much I replayed that conversation in my head, I still couldn't make sense of it. Nights were the hardest. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, with a million thoughts racing through my mind. The silence was deafening. It's funny how quiet the world gets when your heart is breaking. I'd lie there, replaying every moment of our relationship, trying to pinpoint when it started to fall apart. Was it something I did? Something I didn't do? Did I miss the signs? The self-blame was constant. And then there was the anger. Oh, the anger. I'd go from feeling completely numb to boiling rage in seconds. I was angry at her, angry at myself, angry at the world. It felt like I was being pulled in two different directions. One part of me still loved her, still wanted to fix things, while the other part couldn't forgive her for what she'd done. It was a storm of emotions that I couldn't control. One minute, I was heartbroken, and the next, I was furious. I didn't know how to feel, what to think, or how to move forward. All I knew was that the life I had, the life I thought was secure, was gone, and I was left trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. I knew I had to make a decision, but it wasn't as simple as I thought it would be. Part of me wanted to just pack up and leave, to walk away from everything and never look back. I mean, how could I stay with someone who had betrayed me like that? How could I ever trust her again? The logical side of me knew what I should do: just leave, start fresh. But then there was this other part, the part that remembered all the good times, the memories we shared, the life we had built together. It wasn't easy to let go of that. I kept thinking, maybe, just maybe we could fix it. Maybe we could rebuild, start over, make it work. After all, we had history, years of it. Was I really ready to throw all of that away? I went back and forth in my mind, 1 minute telling myself it was over, and the next, convincing myself that it wasn't. I'd catch glimpses of Jess around the house, and for a second, everything felt normal, like nothing had changed. But then the reality would hit me like a ton of bricks, and I'd remember. She cheated. She chose someone else over me. And that was the part I couldn't get past. No matter how much I wanted to fix things, I couldn't erase what she had done. The trust was gone, and without trust, what did we really have? I talked to friends, I tried to get advice, but no one could tell me what to do. In the end, it was up to me, and I had to figure it out for myself. After a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of soul-searching, I finally made my choice. I couldn't stay. I couldn't live the rest of my life wondering if it would happen again, constantly questioning her, constantly doubting. That wasn't the kind of life I wanted. So, I decided to leave. It wasn't easy. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but deep down, I knew it was the right one. Staying would have meant living with the pain, with the betrayal, every single day, and I deserved better than that. After I made the decision to leave, I realized I couldn't do this alone. I needed help, someone to talk to, someone who could give me perspective. So, I reached out to a few close friends and family. At first, I wasn't sure how to bring it up. How do you tell people your marriage has fallen apart? But when I finally did, I was surprised by how much support I got. My best friend, Dave, was the first person I called. We'd known each other for years, and he had seen me through a lot of tough times, but this was different. I remember sitting in my car, just trying to find the words, and before I could even explain everything, he said, "Mike, I'm here for you. Whatever you need, man." It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest, just knowing I didn't have to go through this alone. Then there was my sister. She's always been the practical one in the family, and when I told her about Jess, she didn't hold back. "You deserve better," she said, blunt as always, and maybe that was exactly what I needed to hear. In the midst of all the emotional chaos, her words were a reminder that I had value, that my life wasn't defined by this betrayal. Talking to them, hearing their perspectives, helped me see things more clearly. They reminded me that I wasn't the failure I had started to believe I was. Yeah, my marriage had crumbled, but that didn't mean I was broken beyond repair. They gave me the strength I needed to face the next steps, even if I didn't know exactly what those steps were just yet. Family dinners, long talks over coffee with friends, it all made a difference. I realized that while I might have lost my marriage, I hadn't lost everything. I still had people who cared about me, who had my back. And in that moment, that was more than enough. After leaning on friends and family, something inside me shifted. I realized I didn't have to carry this weight all by myself. Their support gave me a sense of strength I hadn't felt in weeks. But even with their encouragement, I knew the real work had to come from me. Healing wasn't going to happen overnight, and it wasn't going to come from anyone else. It had to start with me. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this define me. Yeah, Jess's betrayal hit me hard, harder than anything I'd ever been through, but I wasn't going to let it break me. I started focusing on myself, on what I needed to rebuild. Little by little, I found ways to take my mind off the pain. I threw myself into my work, spent more time at the gym, started picking up hobbies I'd abandoned over the years. It wasn't about distracting myself. It was about taking back control of my life. There were still bad days, of course. Days where I'd wake up, and the first thing that hit me was the pain, the anger, the sense of loss. But then, there were the good days. The days where I'd remember that life goes on, that I still had a future ahead of me. Those days, I felt stronger. I could feel myself slowly starting to heal, piece by piece. I started realizing that what happened with Jess wasn't a reflection of who I was. It didn't mean I was worthless or that I wasn't enough. It meant that I deserved better. Someone who would appreciate me for who I am, not for what I could or couldn't offer. And as time went on, I began to believe that more and more. The healing didn't happen all at once, but every day, I felt a little bit stronger. It wasn't about getting over Jess. It was about finding myself again, finding the strength to move forward. And for the first time in a long time, I started to feel like that was possible. As the weeks went by, I started to feel like myself again. I wasn't fully healed, not by a long shot, but I was moving forward. And then, out of nowhere, I met someone new. Her name was Sarah. It wasn't some grand, dramatic moment. No fireworks or sweeping gestures. We met through mutual friends, just casually, and at first I didn't think much of it. Honestly, I wasn't even looking for anything. After everything that had happened with Jess, the last thing I wanted was to jump into another relationship. But there was something about Sarah. She had this warmth, this kindness about her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at ease. There were no pretenses, no pressure, just easy conversations and a connection that grew naturally. Still, it wasn't easy. Trusting someone again after being betrayed is complicated. Every time things started to feel good, that little voice in the back of my mind would remind me of what happened with Jess. What if it happens again? I'd think. What if Sarah turns out to be like Jess's? The fear was always there, lurking, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Sarah was different. She didn't push, didn't rush anything. She gave me space when I needed it and didn't try to force me to open up before I was ready. Over time, she showed me, through her actions, not just her words, that I could trust her. It was in the little things, like how she listened when I talked about my past, or how she never made me feel guilty for being hesitant to get too close, too quickly. With Sarah, I started to rebuild what I thought I'd lost forever. Trust. It wasn't just trust in her, though. It was trust in myself. Trust that I could choose someone better this time, someone who valued loyalty, someone who saw me for who I was and accepted me, flaws and all. And slowly, I let my guard down. Not all at once, but little by little, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. After a while, something strange happened. Something I never thought was possible. After everything that had happened, I started to feel happy again. Real, genuine happiness. At first, it felt almost unnatural, like I didn't deserve it after the mess of my past. But there it was, slowly creeping in as Sarah and I spent more time together. I started to realize that happiness doesn't come from what you have or who you're with. It comes from feeling at peace, from being with someone who makes you feel valued. With Sarah, it wasn't about the money, the status, or the picture-perfect life I thought I needed to chase. It was about those small moments. Her laugh when I made a joke, the way she listened to me when I talked about my day, the way she made me feel like I was worth something, just by being myself. That was the biggest difference between what I had with Jess and what I was building with Sarah. With Jess, I was always trying to live up to something, trying to be more, to give more, thinking that was the way to keep her happy. But with Sarah, I didn't have to prove anything. She loved me for who I was, as flawed and broken as I felt sometimes. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't broken, not really. I'd been hurt, sure, betrayed, but I hadn't been destroyed. I could love again. I could trust again. And I could find happiness, real happiness, with someone who was willing to meet me halfway. Sarah and I weren't perfect, but we were real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a future to look forward to. A future that wasn't about chasing some impossible ideal, but about finding joy in the simple things, in being with someone who made me feel like I was enough. In the end, I realized that true happiness wasn't about wealth, fame, or status. It was about connection, loyalty, and love. And with Sarah, I had found all three. As I look back now, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There was a time when I thought I'd never recover, when the betrayal was all I could think about, all I could feel. But now, standing on the other side of it, I realize something important. It wasn't just about what happened to me, it was about how I chose to respond. When Jess left, I felt like my world was crumbling, like everything I'd built was falling apart. But what I've learned through all of this is that sometimes, when life falls apart, it's actually falling into place. I had to lose something I thought was everything to find out what really mattered. I used to believe that bad people should be punished, that life would somehow even the score. But now I know that real justice isn't about seeing others suffer. It's about finding your own peace. Jess made her choices, and I made mine. And in the end, I realized that the best revenge wasn't anger or bitterness. It was moving on. It was building a life that I was proud of, with someone who truly cared about me. What started as heartbreak ended as healing. What felt like the end was actually a new beginning. I never thought I'd be grateful for what happened, but in a strange way, I am. It forced me to face things I never wanted to admit to myself. It made me stronger, more resilient. It showed me that happiness isn't found in status or wealth. It's found in the people who stand by your side, who love you for who you are. So, if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that life doesn't always go as planned. But sometimes it takes losing everything to find what really matters. And now, with Sarah by my side, I've found something I thought I'd lost forever. Happiness, trust, and real, genuine love. That's my story. Not the one I thought I'd have, but the one I needed.